Hi, and welcome to our Ideal Roofing installation training video. My name is Brad, and I'll be showing you a step-by-step basic installation sequence for our Wakefield bridge metal shingles. What makes Wakefield bridge so good? First, it's a direct-to-deck system where no strapping is necessary. It includes a 50-year transferable warranty, as well the best paint system available to the residential metal market. Before we begin, it's worth mentioning that safety is a very important aspect. We recommend wearing soft-soled shoes for good traction on a roof. Wear safety gloves. The metal can become very sharp with all the exposed cut edges. Be sure to comply with all your local building codes, and again, we'd like you to work in a very safe, workmanlike manner. I would like to quickly note that our minimum pitch requirement for Wakefield bridge metal shingles is no pitch less than 412. Tools needed: we need a regular pouch, 6-inch hand seamers, a hammer, a tape measure, and a variety of snips comfortable for you to work with. A chalk line, and our Wakefield Gable Valley bender. Let's begin. The first step, as with asphalt, is to put down a good synthetic underlayment. In this application, we have chosen to use a 2-in-1 adhesive underlayment product. Since this application is an example of new construction, you need to be at least 3 feet inside the warm wall with this material, as per the Ontario Building Code. And as always, follow your local guidelines and regulations. The underlayment installs directly over the entire roof. It is recommended to overlap the hips, weave the valleys on both sides from bottom to top. When overlapping the valleys and the hips, make sure to overlap by at least the width of the material provided. Once that is done, you are ready to install the starter strip. In our case, we had an outside and inside corner. As you can see, you can cut, bend, and fold a single piece of starter to match the design of your roof. This not only makes for a better looking roof, but it also provides more strength. Last thing to note for the starter strip is that the screws should be staggered and spaced no more than 8 to 10 inches apart. The next step is to complete all the accessories. It doesn't matter if you do the valley, gable, or sidewalls first, but ideally you would like to complete each section going from left to right. In our case, we did the valley first. I use a pair of vice grips to hold the valley onto the starter strip. I then mark both the bottom and the top of the valley to indicate where I will cut and fold. Now that I have my mark, I remove the valley, make the cuts, and I create the fold. In order to do that, you have to allow 3/4 of an inch of the material, which will then be cut on the line. Once you cut the valley on this line, make a relief cut up the center of the valley by 3/4 of an inch. Now take your seamers and make the fold. The fold helps secure the valley into place. It also provides moisture protection from water creeping back underneath the valley. We now install the valley back into place using screws. Secure the valley by placing screws no more than 12 to 14 inches apart. You now have to screw on both sides of the outer nailing hem all the way to the top. Now that the valley's been installed, we will move on to the gable. Ideal Roofing has 2 options for gables: either a 2-piece drip edge J-channel combination or a 90-degree gable drip starter where you fold the shingle out and around the outer edge. Our most recommended form of successfully completing any gables is to fold the shingles over the starter strip. You can do this by hand or by using the Ideal Roofing handheld bending tool. In order to do this, you'll need to add 3/4 of an inch allowance to the shingle beyond the gable trim. And here you will see us install the right end shingles by hand, folding the shingles around the 815 gable starter trim. This method promotes all moisture and debris, example leaves, helicopters, or dirt, to wash off completely and not get anything stuck or to collect inside that channel. For our purpose today, we use the 2-piece gable option. First, installing the drip starter, similar to the valley, we allow 3/4 of an inch extra to fold back onto the starter. The drip edge is secured with screws and spacing no more than 8 to 10 inches. It is required to place a bead of butyl sealant between the J-trim and the 90-degree gable drip starter. As this is a demonstration roof, we do not apply the sealant. For the J-channel, extend it down past the starter strip to allow you to fold it back and lock it into position. I'm allowing the J-channel to extend out beyond the outside edge of the gable drip starter by 1/4 of an inch to help keep water away from the continuous seam created where the 2 pieces come together. Again, screws should be placed a maximum of 8 to 10 inches apart. This area can now start to be shingled. Let's jump over to the sidewall installation section now. Start with installing the sidewall on the right side of this section. The sidewall has a built-in channel to receive the shingle and allow water to drain out properly. Screw the sidewall into place, spacing the screws no more than 8 to 10 inches apart. The next step is to install the backer rod. The foam backer rod ensures a tight water seal. Next, apply a liberal bead of butyl caulking to hold the backer rod into place. You must also properly seal the vertical portion of the sidewall with tuck tape and/or a peel and stick product against the existing house wrap or wall sheathing. You will notice at the bottom of the sidewall, we've also extended it down 3/4 of an inch in order to fold the bottom and lock it into place. Now that all the accessories for this video are installed, let's lay some shingles. In this case, the gable section isn't very wide, so we start by measuring the area, then cutting the shingle to match the hip angle. You must also cut a 1-inch weep hole at the bottom left-hand corner of the shingle where it meets the gable end starter to allow moisture or water to drain out. Since all metal roofing systems have controlled water channels, it is essential to cut out this weep hole to allow water to drain out of the shingle. When using a full shingle, you are required to use a minimum of 5 screws to hold the shingle into place, and a minimum of 3 screws is required if using less than a half a shingle. Note the top part of the J channel folds down and in. This closes off the hole created in this area to enhance the appearance from the ground and also helps avoid any bugs, bees of entering this area. Like asphalt, we stagger the shingles to avoid repeating patterns. Ideal Roofing recommends installing a full shingle, then 2/3, and then 1/3. The shingles are marked with a dimple at each 1/3. They are pressed into the nailing hem of the shingle to reference where the cut to create the staggered pattern appearance. Repeat the installation procedure all the way to the top. This pattern will have to be adjusted coming out of the valley, going into another valley, or coming from a hip to a valley transition like here. Okay, I'd like to note the minimum stagger for the vertical locks left and right of each other should be no closer than 8 inches to create a random panel appearance. Now let's shingle from the hip into the valley from left to right. As a helpful tip, it is a good idea to pre-measure each section before laying the shingles to avoid being left with small, unmanageable size pieces. If this were to happen, use clear silicone and a small self-tapping screw to secure this into place. Continuing from the hip to the valley, I mark and cut the hip angle onto the first shingle and then begin installing the first row. Once you get to the valley, you are now ready to mark the angle of the valley. With the length and angle marked, you will again add a folding allowance of 3/4 of an inch to fold onto the provided rib of the valley. Here you'll see me demonstrate the cutting and folding process. Okay, we begin with removing the top right portion of the nailing hem. Discard the waste material. I can now mark at the bottom and top of the shingle for cutting and folding, allowing the 3/4 inches, couple of notches. Take our Gable tool, trace our valley angle, cut along the line, remove the unwanted material, fold out the bottom lock, and making an allowance for our folding tool, trim and remove the bottom lock. Discard the waste, bevel cut the top, mark the bottom section. This will allow moisture out from the nailing hem of the valley. We then fold out the butt end of the lock, remove a portion of the material. This will allow for moisture to drain out once in place. Apply our Gable folding tool, complete our fold. We are now completed. Now continue the shingle procedure all the way to the top of this section. Again, apply recommended staggering panel appearance, not allowing vertical lock spacing to be anything less than 8 inches. Let's begin the right side of our valley now. Measure and trace the angle of the valley onto the full shingle. Helpful tip, you can use the angle created from the first shingle as a template to avoid having to remeasure the angle on the next starting shingles. To avoid repeating ourselves too much, follow the instructions that we've already used on the left-hand side of the valley. folding onto the reverse angle of the valley rib provided and complete this section. Again, making sure and keeping a staggered panel appearance throughout this section. Now that the shingles are laid, you have to complete the hip caps before the ridge caps can be installed. The first step is to apply a peel and stick ice and water shield to the hip, covering at least 3 inches on either side. Then you have to field form the first piece of the hip cap by cutting and folding it into place. Once you are satisfied that the fit is tight, secure the cap into place with 2 screws per side of each cap. Work your way to the top of each hip, ensuring that you keep the caps in a straight line. With the hip caps now completed, you now have 3 options to finish the ridge. On our mock-up roof, we've used Wakefield bridge hip ridge caps. As the name suggests, they are the same pieces used on the hip section as well as on the ridge. Something worth noting is that the ridge and hip caps use a fastening system with a concealed nailing hem. This keeps the look consistent with the rest of the roof, which is also a concealed fastening system. Make sure that you pay close attention to the dominant wind direction when installing the ridge caps. Make sure that the front of the cap is going with the wind and not against it. This is important because the dominant winds will create uplift on your ridge caps. Like the hip section, you have to field form the first piece of the ridge cap to get it started. It is a good idea to chalk a line to ensure that the caps stay straight, otherwise the installation is virtually the same as the hip caps. You will ice and water shield the ridge overlapping the nailing hems on either side, this securing each cap with 4 screws, 2 on either side. Should you choose to use the other options for the ridge, you're either going to select the Liberty Continuous Ridge Cap or the Continuous Ridge Vent. All 3 ridge options will be demonstrated in future videos of our install series. This now concludes our first tutorial of the series. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at bwhitley@idealroofing.ca.